Hi everyone. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and see some of you again and meet some of you. I'm Josephine, as Hannah mentioned. I'm at V&A, actually moving soon. So it's really nice to talk about what I have been doing, what I am working on at the moment, and what I will be leaving. But Katie is also here today. So I'm a curator in the Asian department where I really my focus is on Japan and particularly textiles and dress. We actually do have an interesting collection of Japanese children's dress from the Edo period, so this the 17th century to mid 19th, right up until today. And of course, one of the most recent displays we did this was through our exhibition Kimono, Kyoto, Catwalk, which opened in February 2020. So that has slightly challenged run, but it's currently it's been on an international tour. After London, it went to Gothenburg in Sweden, and it's going to be opening in Paris in November at the Musée Quai Branly. So if you didn't get to see it in London, please make it to Paris. So of course, the V&A is very known for doing big fashion exhibitions, and the Kimono exhibition was very much part of this. But what was interesting when I was thinking about this was we actually had children's dress throughout our exhibition, and that really is not generally the case with our big fashion exhibitions. Either they're focusing on kind of one known designer. As far as I know, McQueen didn't make children's clothes, so there's kind of no way of including it. Although I do think, the story of Baby Dior perhaps could have been explored in the Dior exhibition. All exhibitions are kind of looking at, parts of fashion history that have been neglected. Kimono was very much part of this, as is our more recent exhibitions, Masculinities and African Fashion. So kind of, I think because, those exhibitions are kind of seem to be focusing on these neglected areas, they then maybe might neglect another area, i.e. children's dress. Oops, it's falling off. But interestingly, as I mentioned, sorry, is that okay? We actually had children's dress throughout Kimono. And I must admit, and then of course, I must also acknowledge the wonderful exhibitions and displays at the former Museum of Childhood. And I think this could be one of the reasons why the V&A has often not shown children's dress at the V&A, because we've always had a site for this. So just wanted to acknowledge the amazing work that has happened and will be happening soon. But to go back to Kimono. So to include children's dress in this, it wasn't a conscious decision. It just actually happened quite naturally. And some reasons this was because of the existence of children's fashion in our collection and the collections we were borrowing from. It was very much drawn from our fabulous kimono collection, but also some very important kimono collections, particularly the Kalili collection, which you'll see later. But yeah, the inclusion was because we had the objects and they demanded to be included. There was a really, really strong reason for their inclusion. So the first, and just to kind of say a little bit more, sorry, in case you didn't see the exhibition, the kind of aims was this, to show the kimono, which many people think of as this kind of iconic symbol of Japan, kind of timeless and unchanging, was to really show that it's actually got this dynamic fashion history, but that it's also been part of global fashion. It's both been influenced and influenced fashion around the world. So it really was a fashion history of the garment. And the first section of the exhibition was looking at the development of the sophisticated fashion system in Japan during the Edo period, so from the 17th century. And kind of to start with this, you have to explain the samurai. And this is the samurai section of the exhibition. And this is where children's dress really worked, because for many people, they think samurai just means warrior. What they don't necessarily understand is that it's actually a class. So in order to kind of show that it's not just men in armor, but actually you could have a samurai family, there's a samurai woman, samurai children, it's a class. We chose to kind of show samurai dress at kind of different ages and the gender nature, because this was the ruling class who led a very strictly regimented life. They had a very formal court culture, and they ruled the nation and implemented various rules. So the dress that they wore was highly codified and only for people of samurai class. So it's a very feudal system. So in this display, you have a kind of samurai man's costume on the right, possibly a daimyo, so a feudal lord. A very, very formal kimono for a woman. This was always challenging. Was she a young but married woman, as opposed to a young unmarried or an older married woman? And then a less formal kimono at the back for normal court days. And then we had these other two garments, which were more garments for what one could call children. So the one on the left, we acquired kind of in preparation for the exhibition in a group of other garments. This is known as a goshodoki kimono, which is kind of loosely translated as kind of palace landscape style. And this is slightly generic style, and that once you kind of see them, you can see that they're quite similar. They're usually decorated with these idyllic landscape scenes, sometimes all over, such as this one, which shows that it was be for a very formal occasion. If it's only decorated from the waist down, it's for a less formal occasion. They often have references to classical literature, such as the Tale of Genji, or and they'll just be kind of small references. So the viewer of this would have to know the subject in order to read it. And this kimono would have been for a young samurai girl attending court. And we acquired it, kind of knowing this, we acquired it in a group with adults kimono, wanting to kind of fill the gaps, wanting to have children's wear represented. Whereas the garment on the right, which is kamishimo, it's very formal wear for samurai men. But we had only ever really seen this. It's been in the collection for a long time, since 1980. We've only ever seen it flat. And that is one of the kind of issues with Japanese dress, is it tends to be displayed flat, particularly in outside of Japan. And you tend to think of it kind of as flat. It's not always shown on mannequins, and we were really keen to show Japanese dress on mannequins as much as possible to show its three-dimensionality. So we'd only ever seen this flat. When we put it on a mannequin, we were like, it's really small. We were like, is this for a man? And it's tricky because height in Japan drastically changed after the late 19th century. So we were kind of having lots of discussions about, was he just a very, very short man? Like, what? So we kind of agreed that it was possibly a young boy, a teenager who's just, transitioning, because certainly a child wouldn't wear this, but it did seem kind of unusually small. And then we discussed it with our curator of kind of samurai and arms and armor, and he did some research and he was finding, some kind of images of younger samurai men, and then got carried away trying to find the right kind of sword for this. So this was a place where including children's where it really made sense. We were showing that, and also that we had the garments as well. This was a great example, but it's showing this as a power structure and the children as being part of this power structure. These are people who had absolutely no choice really in what they wore at all. The next inclusion of children's wear was in the second section of the exhibition, which was called Kimono in the World, and it was looking at the kind of global exchange of kimono between initially Japan and Europe, and then as the wider world from the 17th century up until the early 20th century. And kimono here was in the Meiji display. So this is when Japan is opened up to the world, so 1868 to 1912. There's rapid modernization, but most women still wear kimono, even though men are kind of adopting Western wear. And actually, the kimono we included here, I must admit, was purely for formal reasons. It was not because it was a child's kimono at all. It was simply because we found a match. So it was simply because we had this kimono pattern book, and we had found a near identical match of the pattern and the garment. So it was really just for the formal qualities and this discovery that we included the child's kimono. That was it. And as I mentioned, kimono are often displayed flat. This one was just displayed on a T-bar. And I think this is why there are actually kind of more kimono in collections, because often kimono are not necessarily considered clothing, but art, because of that two-dimensionality, sorry. So I think that's why we see more Japanese dress in collections, because they're collected for the formal qualities and not thought about as clothing. And I must admit that's kind of the case here. But one type of kimono, of children's kimono, that is largely found in collections, and there are quite a lot of these collections now. They've become very popular recently, is novelty print and propaganda kimono, and from the kind of 1920s to 40s. And these kind of, there's a lot of them, and there's been a huge interest in them recently. And these kind of prints were really mostly found in clothing for boys and men, adult men. Although you can sometimes find them for women, but what most of these, especially novelty prints, were kind of taking prints and motifs from modern life. So often they'll depict, cars or modern buildings and planes. And this one from our collection, it is celebrating the first flight from Japan to the UK, Croydon to be exact. And it's a wonderfully charming garment. It's padded throughout, so it's a really cozy little garment, and it's made of wool. And it shows, all these kind of different stops, and then it's got little rondels that have Mount Fuji. I think it's is it Tower Bridge, and then also has the French flag on it as well. So there's a lot of these kind of novelty prints that are really fun. But then as Japan kind of rapidly militarized, these prints quite quickly were adapted to more kind of displays of nationalistic ideology. And so what you see is this kind of shift from them just being planes and cars to battleships and warplanes. And including these in the show was actually quite a difficult decision because we knew they'd be quite controversial. They're very emotive objects. And they really tell the kind of average human side of war. These were not, there was no kind of official insistence on wearing these. These were just kind of consumed by everyday people. And this particular garment is a kimono for a baby boy for his first visit to a shrine. And usually these garments would have a koi carp or a bird of prey as kind of symbol of strength. And you can see it's kind of being replaced by a battleship. Another symbol of strength. And very much kind of clothed in this with the kind of hope for this child's future, which at that point, a parent's hope would be that their son go on to be, a brave soldier. So it was tricky because we did get complaints about this, but we thought it was really important to include this. And I think because even though we had in that section, we also had a propaganda kimono for a man and obi for a woman, but it was that one garment we got the complaints about. So I think it's because this notion that there's lack of agency, that it's imprinting, it's clothing your child in your desires, that caused it, but there were other reasons for the complaints as well. Then the final section that we included children's wear was in the section which was called Kimono Revered. And this was looking at the kind of post-war period when kimono stopped being an item of daily dress and then became a ceremonial costume that was only donned for kind of certain occasions, usually very formal, beautiful, expensive dyed silk, but kind of divorced from kind of fashion, usually more historic in style and not reflecting contemporary taste. And we kind of wanted to kind of show how kimono became this item of dress that you wore at different kind of stages of life to mark your kind of journey as a Japanese person. So, kind of from your first visit to the shrine, to Shichigo-san, which is a festival for girls at age 3 and 7 and boys at age 5, where they all get dressed up in kimono and go to a shrine to pray for their health and happiness. Coming of age at 20, and then for women, not always men, when you get married. And then it was going to be birth, death, and marriages, but sadly, death had to be cut for various reasons. And so with this section, we really wanted to kind of tell more personal stories, what it was like to wear kimono at this moment in your life, especially because for many of these wearers, it was, it wasn't something they did every day. And luckily we found this great example from Yukiko Yoshi, who was very much a child of Japan's bubble era. So she had her her Shichigo-san days in the 70s, and then her coming of age in 1990. So really, this was a time where Japan was very wealthy, and families were investing huge amounts of money into these kimono that were only going to be worn for one day. And her memories of wearing kimono were were wonderful, and I think very kind of representative of her generation, which was that she hated it, absolutely hated it. You know, she wore Western clothes, she wore jeans, and it was this one day that her parents made her get dressed in kimono. It was really uncomfortable. You can see she's wearing really high gaiters. She was like, my feet hurt so much. She just hated it, and for her and many people of her generation, just completely put them off wearing kimono ever again. It was just so associated, discomfort, duty, and divorced from what they wanted to wear. So that was that story. But I realize now that there was a great kind of, and that's the kind of last example of children's wear we had in the exhibition. But I realize now there was a really big omission, and this is what you get in reflection from doing a big project, as we kind of left. You can see her just in the back there. We left kimono in the ceremonial, children's kimono in the ceremonial realm, because the finale of the exhibition was looking at the great kimono revival that's been happening in the recent decades. And it's returned to a kind of example. It's returned to fashion, and we ignored children's wear. We didn't include it in that narrative. We included men's wear. We looked at genderless fashion, but we forgot about children, which is a real pity because some of these designers that we included make children's wear, and also Shichigo-san, continues and means that there's a great array of different styles and fashions for this festival, and I think there's more children being able to choose what they wear for it. I mean, or highly styled children from very fashion conscious parents, but there's this festival means you'll continually have different kimono fashions for children. So I do regret that. Apart from this exhibition, we of course have always displayed kimono for children in our permanent galleries, the Toshiba Gallery, and also we have, and that's where you see Flight when it was first displayed when we reopened the gallery, and then we also have a section that's kind of devoted to kawaii, so this Japanese aesthetic of cute, that kind of really is focused on kind of childlike aesthetics and childlike enjoyment of things throughout life. And the V&A, I was looking at when we actually first started collecting children's wear, and I think these are the earliest examples, so from 1963. And this little blue kimono is actually going to be on display in Young V&A. So we do have quite a long history of collecting Japanese children's wear. And then we also have many prints that depict children. The Edo period was a great period of celebrating childhood. There are many idealized depictions of childhood that we look at. But, as Jerry was saying, collecting in museums can be very limited unless you have a very strong collections policy with funding to match. You can be quite limited by what you acquire. And while we've been very kind of active in trying to address the gaps, particularly at the moment where we don't have an acquisition fund, we're very dependent on donations. But then you just never know what you're going to get. And one amazing donation we've recently had is these pairs of heelless shoes by the Japanese artist Noritaka Tatehana, who has recently donated these, the green ones and the braided examples are on their way, hopefully. So this is a project he's done with the Tokyo government and to kind of revive Tokyo crafts. And he sent these to us. And we were just kind of confused as to why we had this, what the story was behind the very, very small, the small shoes. We were like, we were trying to think, who are they for? I mean, these are kind of shoes are kind of artworks, but people do wear them. Lady Gaga being his most famous client. So we're like, look, these actually, does he make these for children? So I was thinking, I know that, with Shichigo-san, sometimes they, sometimes it's not always kimono, sometimes it's just a really fabulous outfit. So I was like, these shoes for a Shichigo-san festival. But unfortunately, the answer was not as exciting as that. It was really just that a friend of his had asked him to make shoes for their child, not the heelless ones. So he did, and then he had the last. So he was just experimenting in the form and scale. So sadly not, because I had visions of these on a child in a pram. But it's that due to us having this incredible Japanese collection, which is so diverse, even though the children's wear is small, that we were asked to come up with this exhibition for Young V&A. And I must say, it has not been formally announced, so please keep it so we don't have too much that we can say about it, but Katie and I are working on this exhibition for the new Young V&A, which, if you want information about that, she's the person to go to. But it's provisionally titled Journey Through Japan. And again, like we were kind of inspired by COVID, people's being unable to travel, but Japan being a really perfect place to travel with children. And really focusing on how it's such a kind of child-oriented and child-friendly culture. So in this, I'm really hoping to kind of redress some of the mistakes I made with kimono by showing children's fashion, but really trying to show it from the child's perspective as well. And so one example we're hoping to include, everything's very TBC, is this fabulous collaboration between Sailor Moon and Vans. Sailor Moon, for many of us, myself included, was their kind of entree to anime, and she is just celebrating 30th year anniversary, which is why we have this collaboration. And they have done various ranges, some kind of linking to cosplay, as you can see, the little beanie with the ears, some kind of alluding to the manga, the print version, so they have kind of black and white editions. But what's great about this collection is it's not gendered at all. So it includes children's wear and adults wear, but it's really inclusionary. And so we're very excited to hopefully have some examples of this. And then also we have been trying to work with Coco Pink Princess, who is, for want of a better word, a Japanese street style fashion influencer. We're trying to work around this and how we frame it. But she is a great style icon and child stylist. And she, her story is that she and her family moved to Tokyo after the Fukushima earthquakes. And her parents moved to Harajuku, where they opened a vintage store. And she would just hang out in the store, meet, the different customers, and was just really excited and inspired by seeing people being really creative with fashion. So she would dress up too, and she would see people taking photos and putting them on Instagram. So she just wanted to do the same. So she has an Instagram account that is managed by her parents. And we're hoping to maybe invite her to style an outfit for us using examples of vintage clothing sourced in the UK, so things from Oxford. Because what we're also wanting to show is not only to be creative and inspire sartorial creativity with children, but to also show it doesn't have to be designer. You don't have to be in vintage shop and Harajuku. That actually you can do this too. So we're working on this. So thank you, Derek.